The archive. The lockbox was steel, olive drab, rusted at the hinges. Inside it lay the names of children who had forgotten they existed. Her name was there too. Subject 42. And now someone was trying to kill her for it. 13 hours earlier, Emily's sneaker kicked through dust and memory. The basement of the St. Jude Community Center smelled like failure. Mildewed folders, cardboard gone soft with age. A fluorescent bulb buzzed overhead, flickering its last years into the gray afternoon. Emily had been sorting donations for 3 hours, the volunteer shift that paid nothing but kept her out of the apartment, away from the silence where she lived alone now that her father had stopped calling. She kicked a heavy cardboard box labeled Youth Outreach 1994. Dust erupted around her ankles in a cloud so thick she coughed, bent double, her hand reaching for the stack of folders to steady herself. The box was heavy, deeper than it looked. Beneath a layer of moth-eaten wool blankets, her fingers found something else. Something cold, steel, military grade, painted olive drab with rust blooming at the hinges like a disease. Emily gripped the lid. Locked. She didn't think about why, didn't question the voice in her skull that whispered, "Don't open this." Instead, she walked to the furnace, found the iron poker used to stoke the coals, and came back. She jammed the tip into the seam between the lid and the box and heaved. Her muscles screamed. Her face turned red. The veins in her forearm popped like they were trying to escape her skin. The lock snapped with a sound like a gunshot. The lid flew open. Inside, 12 black Sony microcassettes arranged in perfect rows, and a digital recorder, its surface scarred with use. Etched into the cold steel were 3 words: Project Leith. Emily's hand moved without permission. She reached for the weathered notebook at the bottom of the box. The first page bore her father's handwriting, that precise, clinical script she recognized from the margins of her childhood. Notes written while he wasn't paying attention to her at dinner. The paper rattled as her fingers trembled. Subject 42. Partial memory erasure successful. Her father's voice in ink. His work, his project. She was numbered, cataloged, experimented on. The basement suddenly felt smaller, the buzzing light louder. Emily shoved everything back into the box, pulled it close to her chest, and moved toward the stairs. She didn't run. Running would have meant acknowledging the thing that was happening, that something real and terrible had been buried here, and now she held it in her hands. By the time she reached the alley behind the center, the sky had turned the color of wet concrete. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder. Emily stepped into it, the heavy box tucked under her left arm. And that's when the shadow detached itself from the brick wall. A man, no face visible inside the dark hoodie. Gloved fists, a lead pipe that caught the streetlight and threw it back at her in a glint of promised violence. The pipe swung toward her head. Emily ducked. The metal clanged against the brick wall behind her, sending sparks flying like dying stars. She didn't think. She swung the heavy lockbox like it weighed nothing, slamming it into the man's ribs with a dull, meaty thud. He grunted, staggered back, and that gave her the space she needed. She ran. Her heels slipped on the greasy pavement. Behind her, the man gasped and scrambled to his feet, fumbling in his pocket for something small and glinting. Emily didn't wait to see what. Her old Corolla was parked 2 blocks away. She knew every shortcut through this neighborhood, every puddle, every crack in the sidewalk. Her lungs burned. Rain plastered her hair to her face, soaked through her jacket, turned the world into a blur of neon and shadow. She found the car, slammed the door just as the man reached it. He hammered on the glass with a gloved fist, once, twice, and she could see his mouth moving, speaking into a radio. A radio. He wasn't alone. He was reporting her. The engine spluttered, coughed. For 3 eternal seconds, nothing. Then it roared to life. Emily shifted into reverse, tires screaming on wet concrete, and shot backward. The man was thrown aside. She watched him in the mirror as she sped away, not chasing, not anymore. Just standing in the rain, speaking quietly into his radio, calm as prayer. She didn't go home. Home was the first place they would look, and she knew, with a certainty that sat in her stomach like a stone, that they were real, that the project was real, that her father had done something so terrible it required erasure. And now that erasure was coming for her, Emily drove for an hour, moving through the empty streets of late evening before she finally parked in the lot of an all-night laundromat and made a decision. She pulled the digital recorder from the box, found an outlet near the washers, plugged it into her phone and opened her email on the ancient laptop she kept in the back seat for emergencies. The first file loaded. Audio waveforms bounced across her screen like heartbeats. She pressed play. Static hissed. Then a voice cut through, deep, measured, terrifyingly familiar. Her father's voice, but not as she knew it. This Arthur Brooks spoke in the tone of a man reading from a prepared statement, clinical, cold, untouched by doubt. This is Dr. Arthur Brooks, July 12, 1994. The riot at the center has been neutralized. Memory inhibitors successfully deployed in the local water supply. Emily's jaw dropped. Water supply. Every child in this neighborhood. Every family that had lived here that summer. She scrolled through the files. One was labeled Brooks E-Recovery. Her hand moved to click it, and she almost didn't. Almost closed the laptop and threw it into the river and tried to pretend this wasn't happening. She clicked it. A medical chart unfurled across her screen. Her childhood photo in the corner. Her date of birth. Beneath it, in clinical language, subject underwent severe traumatic event. Memory suppression administered. Secondary dose recommended for stability. They had erased her memories. Her father had erased her memories. The apartment building's window didn't explode so much as atomize. Glass shards became projectiles, and Emily was moving before her conscious mind caught up. The digital recorder went into her bag. The laptop crashed to the floor. She ran toward the bedroom as heavy boots hit the linoleum in the kitchen. Someone was screaming. It took her a moment to realize it was her. The fire escape was a narrow metal ladder bolted to the brick wall, and Emily climbed with the desperate speed of prey. Below her, the man in tactical gear followed with terrifying grace, each rung ringing out like a bell tolling her death. Her boots clanged. His boots clanged. Rain fell in sheets, turning everything slick and treacherous. She reached the roof, gasped, pushed herself forward into the darkness. The roof was covered in pebbles and broken dreams. Her foot caught on a raised vent pipe, and she went down hard, the lockbox sliding away from her across the stone toward the ledge that opened onto a 6-story drop. The man vaulted the railing and came at her with the fluid movements of someone trained for this, someone who had done this before. Emily grabbed a plastic bucket of roofing tar from the maintenance section. She hurled it. He stumbled, arms windmilling, and that gave her half a second. She tackled him. They went down in a tangle of limbs and desperation, rain on her face, hands around her throat. She jammed her thumb into his eye and felt it yield, felt him scream, felt him shove her backward. She was falling and not falling, right at the edge of the roof, the city spinning below her like a promise of oblivion. The neighboring building's roof. 4 feet away. 6 stories of air between her and the street. Emily jumped. The landing was hard. She rolled, came up running, and didn't look back. Just kept moving across the rooftop maze of the city, jumping the gaps that would have stopped anyone else, until she reached a fire escape that descended into an abandoned lot. Her hands were bleeding, her lungs were fire, but she was alive, and they weren't behind her anymore. It was past midnight when she pointed the car toward her father's house in the suburbs. Arthur was waiting for her, sitting in his study, a glass of scotch in his hand. He didn't turn around when she kicked the door open. Didn't move, even when she slammed the digital recorder onto his mahogany desk, and her voice came out like a weapon. "Project Lethe, Dad. Tell me why my name is on a casualty list from 1994. Her eyes were bloodshot. Her hair was still wet from the rain and her own sweat. She looked like something that had clawed its way up from a grave. Arthur turned slowly. He looked older than Emily remembered. Diminished. He pointed at the smoke detector on the ceiling, at the tiny, blinking red dot embedded in its plastic heart. He put a finger to his lips. Then he pulled a legal pad toward him and began to write. His handwriting was shaking now, the confidence gone. "They are listening. It wasn't an experiment. It was a cover-up for a massacre. You were never supposed to find this." Emily's face paled. She looked at the framed photograph on his desk. Arthur and Emily, last Thanksgiving, smiling at the camera while her 7-year-old son sat on his lap. In the photo, they looked like a family. In this moment, they looked like evidence of lies. Arthur reached for the desk drawer. His hand moved inside, came out with a black Glock. Headlights swept across the study walls, long shadows from the window, multiple vehicles, the sound of car doors opening with the precision of a military operation. Arthur stood. "We don't have much time." He grabbed Emily's arm and pulled her toward the basement door. Behind them, the front window exploded inward in a shower of glass. A flashbang grenade skittered across the hardwood floor, all sound and light and the end of the world. Emily was moving, pulled by her father, stumbling down the basement stairs. The basement was dark and cold and smelled like concrete and secrets. Arthur shoved her toward a tunnel entrance, an old stone passage that connected to the old civil defense network that ran beneath the neighborhood. "The tunnel leads to the neighbor's garage," he said. "Take the Mustang. The keys are in the ignition. Drive north. Don't stop for anything." "Dad." "Go." Emily heard the first gunshots as she stumbled into the darkness. She heard them above her, thunderous, rhythmic, the sound of her father taking bullets to the chest because someone had to die so that she could live. She heard the final thud of his body hitting the floor. She put her hand over her mouth to stifle the scream that wanted to come, and she kept moving deeper into the dark. The tunnel was narrow and filled with knee-deep water that was probably not just water. Emily navigated by the light of her phone, following the markings etched into the walls. CC01. Community Center, Sector 1. Her father had told her about these tunnels when she was a child, during one of his rare moments of openness. A network built during the Cold War. A skeleton beneath the city. She climbed a rusty ladder. Her fingers ached. The metal was slick with corrosion and slime. Above her, a manhole cover. She pushed. It slid back with a screech of metal on concrete, and she hauled herself up and out into a dusty garage filled with the amber smell of old oil. A 1969 Mustang sat there in the darkness. Pristine, impossible. The keys were in the ignition. Emily twisted them. The engine turned over. The V8 roared to life like something waking from a long sleep. She threw the car into gear and drove forward directly at the closed garage door. Wood splinters exploded everywhere. The door came apart like matchsticks, and she was out, accelerating into the pre-dawn darkness, alone. The highway was empty and long. Emily drove north, away from the city, her hands steady on the wheel even though everything inside her was coming apart. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she had to move. That's when the first SUV appeared in her mirror. Then the second one. They boxed her in from both sides, and one of them hit the Mustang's rear bumper hard enough to snap her head back against the headrest. The car fishtailed. Emily's vision swam. She could taste blood in her mouth. She yanked the handbrake and spun the wheel. The Mustang did a perfect 180-degree turn, and suddenly she was driving toward the SUVs at 80 miles per hour, directly at them, with nothing but the promise of collision between her and whatever came next. She floored it. The lead SUV tried to swerve. It caught the edge of a concrete barrier and went up on 2 wheels, then 3 wheels. Then it was flipping, rolling across the highway like a toy, spraying sparks and twisted metal and the sound of its own destruction across the asphalt. The second SUV hit her side. Emily felt the impact in her teeth. The Mustang was pushed sideways, toward the edge of the road, toward the embankment that dropped away into darkness. She lost control. The car plunged through a chain-link fence with a sound like the world tearing open. Dirt and stone and tree branches came at her through the windshield. The Mustang slammed nose first into the bottom of the ravine. The airbag deployed with a white explosion of dust. Emily was pinned against the steering wheel, couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only feel the cold blood trickling down her temple and the ringing silence that comes after violence. Then movement, hands reaching through the broken window, dragging her out by her hair. She was thrown onto the wet grass, gasping, her vision swimming. A man in an Italian suit kneeled down beside her. He was holding the digital recorder he had taken from the car. He smiled, and it was the smile of someone who had won. Your father was a genius, Emily. He gave this town a second chance. He erased the day we all turned into monsters. Mayor Henderson. She recognized him from campaign posters, from civic center dedications, from the city council meetings where her father had sometimes gone years ago, when she was still a child and didn't understand what she was seeing. He wore a lapel pin. Emily's eyes fixed on it. A symbol, a circle with 3 intersecting lines. The same symbol etched on the digital recorder. Project Leith. Not a shadow program, not a secret. A civic project. The entire city government was involved. Henderson stood and nodded to the cleaner. The man who had been hunting her, who had come for her in the alley, who had climbed the fire escape in the dark. The cleaner held up an injection needle filled with something clear. Finish it, Henderson said. Make it look like the accident it was. He turned and walked back to his SUV, leaving Emily with the cleaner and the needle and the certainty of death. The cleaner leaned in. Emily's hand was still closed around a shard of windshield glass, razor sharp, that she had been gripping since she clawed her way free of the car. Her eyes snapped open. In them was fire. She struck. The glass shard crossed the cleaner's throat in a red arc. Blood sprayed hot and immediate. He reeled back, clutching his neck, his face a mask of disbelief. He was alive, still alive. And he came at her anyway, desperate, fading, his hands around her throat. They rolled down the embankment toward the creek, locked together, muddy, desperate. Emily found a heavy river rock in the stream bed. She raised it and brought it down. Once. The cleaner's eyes went distant. Twice. Blood mixed with the creek water and ran red toward the ravine. 3 times. The rock made a dull, wet sound that she would hear in her sleep for years to come. Then he was still. Emily crawled away from the body, covered in mud and blood and the viscera of survival. The digital recorder was still there, near the crumpled car, waiting for her. She grabbed it. She had the evidence. She had the truth. But she was trapped. She could see Henderson's SUV disappearing down the highway. She could hear the sirens approaching, not police sirens, but the distinctive wail of the local security patrol, the private army that belonged to the city, that answered to Henderson and the others like him. She had climbed out of the ravine wreckage into a trap with no exit. Emily looked at the drain pipe that ran along the bottom of the ravine. She remembered the transit maps from the community center, old maps showing the network of tunnels and pipes that connected the city like arteries. She remembered her father talking about them. She ran. Bullets kicked up dirt behind her as she dove into the corrugated metal pipe. The shots echoed inside the tunnel, deafening, coming nowhere and everywhere at once. Emily was moving blind, moving on instinct and memory, following the numbered markings on the tunnel walls. CC01, CC02, CC03. Back to the beginning, back to where this had started. The water was knee-deep and foul. The walls were slick with things she didn't want to know about. She navigated by the light of her phone, moving faster than should have been possible, driven by the simple animal need to survive. The recorder was still at her waist. The evidence, the truth, all of it, waiting for someone to hear. She found the ladder, climbed. Her fingers ached as she pulled herself up the rusty rungs. At the top was a manhole cover. She pushed. The metal groaned, then gave way. Emily emerged directly into the kitchen of the St. Jude Community Center. Stainless steel tables reflected the morning light. Everything was quiet. Everything was empty. She was back where it had started, covered in mud and blood and creek water, holding the truth in her trembling hands. The media room was on the second floor. The stairs seemed to stretch forever. Her legs moved mechanically, her body running on reserve power, on pure will. She found the door, found the radio console, found the on-air equipment used for the local neighborhood news, the Voice of Detroit, they called it. Emily started flipping switches. The microphone glowed red. The transmission light came on. She was live, broadcasting to every radio in a 10-mile radius, to every house and car and backyard in the city that her father had helped to forget. She spoke into the microphone. "This is Emily Brooks. You don't remember the 1994 fire because they didn't let you. Listen." She pressed play on the digital recorder. Arthur's voice filled the airwaves. Across the city, people stopped what they were doing. A man at a diner dropped his coffee. A woman in a car pulled over to the side of the road. A group of seniors on a porch stopped talking and turned toward the radio. The voice of the dead man speaking about the children they had murdered, about the water they had poisoned, about the memories they had stolen. The door to the media room exploded inward. Mayor Henderson stood in the doorway, disheveled, wild-eyed, holding a suppressed pistol. He saw the on-air light. He saw the digital recorder playing. He saw Emily standing at the console, calm and steady. His face fell. "It's over, Albert," Emily said. She didn't move toward him. She just stared at him over the barrel of his own gun. Every radio in a 10-mile radius just heard you admit to the water contamination. Henderson's hands shook. The gun wavered. Outside the media room, Emily could hear the sound of a crowd gathering, growing, the sound of a city remembering. Angry voices, footsteps, the sound of wheels turning. He dropped the gun. It hit the carpet with a muffled thud that sounded like surrender. Emily walked down the stone steps of the community center as the sun broke through the clouds. FBI agents were leading Henderson away in handcuffs. The crowd parted for her like she was a ghost, like she was something sacred or terrible or both. An ambulance was waiting. The medic wrapped a shock blanket around her shoulders, and Emily sat on the bumper, shaking, cold despite the morning sun. She found a final microcassette in her pocket. It had writing on it. For Emily. She played it on a portable player. Arthur's voice came through, different now, warm, human. Emily, I didn't just suppress your memory to hide the crime. I suppressed it because you were the one who saved them all. You were the hero. You were 8 years old, and when the fire started, you remembered where the emergency exits were. You guided the other children out. You got them to safety. And then you forgot. I made you forget. Because I thought it would protect you. Because I thought the guilt of what happened that day would destroy you. I was wrong. Forgive me. The tape ended. Emily sat in the shock blanket, holding the player, while the city woke up around her. The morning sun caught the edge of the digital recorder and threw light across her face. A young man approached from the crowd. He was holding something in his scarred hands, a burnt teddy bear with one button eye missing. He held it out to her. "I found this in my attic," he said. "I've had it my whole life, but I never knew why. When I was listening to the radio, I remembered. You gave it to me, in the fire. You carried it out and gave it to me because I was crying." Emily took the bear. Its fur was singed, its plastic nose was melted. But it was real. It was a memory made solid, made permanent, made impossible to erase. She looked up at the community center. The mural on the wall, the one that had been fading and gray for as long as she could remember, seemed to glow in the light. It showed people holding hands, children, adults, a community, alive. Detroit was remembering. Emily's fingers tightened around the bear. The digital recorder was still in her other hand. Evidence. Truth. The thing that couldn't be unmade now that it had been spoken into the world. She turned the recorder off. The tape went silent. The city's collective memory would do the rest of the work now. The sun climbed higher. More people arrived. Cameras. Questions. The beginning of the long, difficult work of remembering what had been taken. The work of justice. The work of healing. But for now, in this moment, on these stone steps, Emily just stood. The burnt bear in one hand, the evidence in the other, the morning light on her face, the city waking up. Detroit was remembering.